also known as a mad painter. And our guest today is Jeffrey Boyd Jr., and he's an independent scientific researcher, educator, investigative journalist, freelance writer, radio talk show personality, and author. He is the founder of the Independent Research Society that now has members in over 105 countries and in every field. Jeffrey's professional background is that he is a chemical metallurgist and materials expert. Jeffrey is blowing people's minds in the U.S. and abroad with his recent discoveries. And we're going to be talking about his recent discoveries in, what do we call this? Archaeology and LiDAR technology. He's been using satellites and other methods to determine if something is manufactured or carved using LiDAR and other new technologies. Jeffrey has discovered massive underground landscapes and structures previously thought to only be part of a mythical underworld. Dr. Lessin, what would you like to say before we bring on Jeffrey?
Okay, Jeffrey's on the leading edge of the technology that's showing us that we have just been scraping the surface, so to speak, and looking at our history. And when you start peeling off the layers, going down so many feet with each LiDAR scan, you find that suddenly the 10,000 person Mayan city becomes a 2 million person city, and all kinds, and that there's fences that, huge pillars that go all around the earth, and there's all these gigantic bases that the United States and others have. It goes on and on. Listen, Jeffrey's going to be able to take you way, way deeper. So I'm really looking forward to what your latest is.
I think back about the band in the 90s, and maybe they were a little enlightened, the alien ant farm. It appears that, even recent events may be connected to what is basically, they call it Sycamore Knoll, but that's worldwide, I found, at a certain depth. And it connects the Tic Tac event and Gimbal and the Go event. Those same events happen literally, the Navy said, like every day. So they practice.
Well, explain to our listeners what that is. What is the Tic Tac event?
The Tic Tac event, they had, every day they take up, this was 2004, so the first one. And they've always seen these things on radar, and they do things like fly like 100 miles an hour, some slow speed, at like 70,000 feet or something, and then they'll drop down instantly within 1 second. That's like 6 miles to 1 foot above the water, and there's something just under the water. And the Navy's kind of ignored it for years. I think this is the same thing that's been around literally, that they were shooting out of the Battle of Los Angeles or the bigger thing that there's something in the water it goes down to, but the F-18's trying to keep it in the camera, but it's moving so slow, and then sometimes it'll just zip. They said they call it jumping. It just you hear the female fighter pilot said it just jumped, like literally meaning it disappeared across the horizon, and just so you get how much in distance that is. Standing on the ground with the curvature of the earth, you have about an 8-mile radius. If you're not on a mountain,
might be jumping. Do you think they might be jumping in and out of our dimension, like interdimensionally?
No, by
you think
jumping,
they're traveling fast?
No, by jumping, she meant just speed, like an SR-71 Blackbird, just so, because people know what that is. That's the one that everybody's seen, our fastest plane, supposedly, that was, the Blackbird. But if it passed in front of you perpendicular and it was going at its fastest speed, supposedly, that we know of, it would disappear over at a dot in the horizon in like a few seconds. 10, 10, 15
Jeffrey, this
seconds.
could be This could be a double meaning. Jump is the word that aboard battleship Galactica that they used for just what Janet's saying. When you shift to another locale through the singularities or the portals, or you go into another dimension.
Yeah, well, that literally is what it is, because they have what's called forward-looking infrared, and in an F-18 Super Hornet, or in a fighter plane, you have something called active tracking. It's a radar lock on something, and that keeps the camera locked on it. The Super Hornet that came out, they were testing them, and the guy's name, and if you watch the Joe Rogan Experience, the interview with, he's in the Independent Research Society too, Jeremy Corbell. It's an excellent interview, because Commander Fravor was the commander of the unit, and they said, real world tasking, we want you to go away from where you are, which is just off the coast of California, around Los Angeles and San Diego. They move pretty quick, but we want you to go a little further out, like right over where Point Doom and all that stuff basically is, right there. And we want you to examine this. And they're like, we're not armed with anything. We're just out here training. So they got out there and they got behind the thing, and it looked, just imagine, they call it a tic-tac event because it looks like a tic-tac. And it actively jammed their radar, which means it detected their radar and sent a signal back that nulls it. And that is consciousness. That's a conscious thing. There's no automatic, like some things aren't picked up by a radar. Something was actively jamming its radar, like blasting a signal at it. But then it, when the plane would get close to it, it would either go up 6 miles in one split second so fast that you couldn't tell if it traveled there or if it skipped there. Just like the guy that they coined the media coined the phrase flying saucer from, when he said it was curved, but they skipped like saucers across water. But what is happened at the Navy came out and they said, okay, this new thing, the Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program or something, and they wanted their pilots to report it, and then they backed it up and they renamed it as something else. But they just wanted to see what would happen on it. But huge amounts of pilots who said, we've seen these things for years, but they got it in there. They got it on their forward-looking infrared camera and zoomed in on it, and their plane couldn't even detect it. And it has the most advanced system that we have on the planet, and it looked like a clear capsule with a cube rotating inside of it. And talking to one of the commanders, he's like, hey, no big deal. These things have been out there doing this for years. But as they were tracking things, they didn't realize that this thing was in a formation of a huge circle of them. And that was on the West Coast. On the East Coast, they have the same, another event like that with the tic-tacs. And then there was another event that looks like a fingernail, like tumbling. And there's a whole bunch of them. And they're all kind of just going south down the coastline, not with it, but just in a straight line. And you have to ask yourself, is that a natural thing, or is it something that we don't understand because we don't see? Only 3.9% of the universe is made of atoms, and we can only see a small sliver between infrared and ultraviolet. And if you look where those places are, like, well, I got a great, now the imaging has improved so much in 1 year, you would not believe. The images I had at Point Doom that I tried to give to the people who were talking about it, like Fade to Black and everybody else, I showed to some people. Dave Cruz called in to Lighting the Void. I made a room, and I instantly got him a blue sonar shot of the inside of Point Doom. And it literally goes under California. It goes back. It's two structures, not one. And Malibu Canyon is cut all the way around it, around both structures, which means it was there before the North American ice cap melted. Because as it melted, it dug Malibu Canyon and Mugu Point. But if you back up and look at it, 6 miles off the coast, 2,100 feet deep, because the archaeology, because that's what it was 12,000 years ago. Because until Göbekli Tepe, they wanted us to think history was 6,000 years. Then Klaus Schmidt tripped over a rock on a tepe, on a hill, a belly, and found the T-stone, and now we have whatever 80 acres, like 10% of it dug up. But I found Norsen Tepe, which is living quarters above and below ground, and now we're finding those things everywhere, like things like that. But it seems where there are events that the Navy, and they're really, I mean, they have their own army, which are the Marines. They have their own Air Force. They pretty much are everything. And they're our largest intelligence. A lot of people think the Air Force is. But everywhere that a daily event happens, there's, like Point Doom, people can't get pictures inside there because Mugu Point Naval Station is right there.
It's a North Malibu.
Oh, North Malibu is
Yeah.
Point Doom. Okay, sorry.
It's absolutely huge. I'll show you a picture of it. And they, everywhere that this happens all the time, you'll find a naval base. So they can keep people out of there, where one of those canyons is dug up to the shore. But you can see, like when you go camping and it's been raining, in a ditch, you dig a ditch, a little ditch or trench around your tent. Water flows around it, but we're talking about thousands and thousands of years, or at least between the two younger Dryas events, if Graham's right. But this thing proves that if the ice cap was still there, you were in Russia or in Asia, and you traveled along the ice wall, like it's like Antarctica, but it's on the North Pole, and you were touching the wall, when you hit ground in North America, where the beach, the sea, and the glacier met, that's where Point Doom met. So if you came from anywhere in the world and you followed that wall, or even in South America, if you traveled north, you'd run into the ice wall. And if you followed the ice wall until you got to the ocean, you would meet it. So it seemed, and looking at the pictures, you can see rows that go back on the state of California, under Baja, that reach literally Arizona. It looks like a parking structure. All the pillars the same size. Google has skewed the image. Started taking some medicine. It's Louisiana. Weather just driving crazy down here. But we found just absolutely the biggest architecture and just this one place, and now I'm finding it literally everywhere. Our history looks more at that depth, at the 2,100, 2,200 feet, not at the 12,000 feet. They're wanting us to ignore that. And I found a way, just you have to learn how to get data. But the part that really blows my mind is I'm using the same satellites and using the same dashboard that people at University of Arizona and people in the intelligence field and everywhere are using, and the fact that how many universities and colleges and professors and researchers are there on the other side, that everyone is just in agreement that it's a natural formation. But if you look at the real picture, not Google Earth, it looks like two NFL stadiums next to each other, but with, imagine the Roman Colosseum, but it's 1,000 times bigger, and hundreds and hundreds of columns that are all exactly the same size as the 199 down. And they're all just...
How big are they? How big are those columns?
They're pretty big because the mountains on top of the water, I've looked at it and I've tried to judge, and I'm like, okay, this is what I'm looking at in the picture, and I'll show you what Google Earth sent. But what they edited, calling it Sycamore Knoll, but they do not nature doesn't make symmetrical. They've made a bridge that connects the two structures, but Google totally erased the big structure. It's the small structure that's still like 10 times the size of an NFL stadium at least. Like it's bigger than the city of Malibu, California, and Thousand Oaks, and all that, because in this one picture, you're looking at Oregon, California, and Baja all in one. And from Malibu and Thousand Oaks all the way down to Baja, and it goes under there, and the support columns, like in a parking structure, disappear into the horizon, and they are equidistant apart and the same size, not just going across the front, but support columns going back. And the smaller structure, it's the same amount of space between each one, but totally symmetrical. It's got pillars on the left side, pillars on the right side, and in the middle it looks like a door, and that's where you can see the poles disappear in the horizon in the underwater, but it still disappears. You can see them get smaller, and I've looked at it in like 10 different bands, and it just it's mind-blowing. It literally holds up the state of California, and the mountains on top look like nothing. And that's why I think we're not alone on this planet. I don't think we ever have been. And just as much as people see and often, it's a lot more likely that something else is here. And we can only see like 5% of 3.9% of the whole universe. And what if some of these things, or whatever built this, has a broader spectrum, or their bodies are out of our visual spectrum, or their bodies are not made of atoms. Only 3.9% of all matter is atoms, and that's out of everything you see. Everything else is a different type of matter. But just the things you see, and the amount of videos. And when I heard Commander Fravor, and I know pilots, and this guy was not, it probably took him years to get in to do the show. And he's like, I really don't care. I've like fake things just to scare people, make them think it's a UFO. If he's a funny guy, he's like, I'd see a campfire on the beach or in the park in California. I'd turn off all the lights, and we'd turn on our, back then, in 2004, they had the green night vision. He would creep up on them, the first plane. You can't hear them until they pass you. So they'd creep up on them and then point the nose up and then kick in the full throttle and the afterburners. So all you see is two circles taking off into space. And then they would look for UFO videos the next day. But he's like, I'll admit to some of them. But he's like, I don't know what these things are, but they actively jam us. They don't care that we're there. And they can go 6 miles or from our height. If we're tracking them, they're jamming our technology, and our guys having to keep the camera on it, and it's just kind of slowly turning the whole time, making the thing turn with it, and then it just drops immediately from 30,000 feet down to just above the surface of the water. And they almost can't tell whether it traveled there or whether it was, I mean, it's just maybe like a very faint blur they saw maybe, but they literally couldn't tell if that was a blur there or not. And they were close to it. I've seen all the videos, and it's comparable with Mexico.
Any kind of theories of that? Like, who's doing this? Is this the Anunnaki? Is this technology related to what we had before? You're tying it in with Point Doom and with Malibu, and they have columns, and columns are similar to what was done in other parts of the world. What do you think?
Like the ant people, you hear and that's what I was going to talk about next. It's like when I'm finding things like this, and then I go back and I say, what's the mythology of that area? And in different places, but name something. Like all the natives out there, some star people, and I'm guessing that would be their most ancient stories passed down. The ant people brought them underground, and maybe that was the second Younger Dryas event. There's a superheating and a super cooling. And
so tell our people who the ant people are. You've mentioned them several times. A lot of our listeners might not know who the ant people are.
The ant people supposedly brought a group of Native Americans and other people underground during an impact event. And after it was over and it was safe to go back to the surface, they said that they let them stay there underground and showed them how to live there and took care of them. And then when it was over, they just took them back to the surface and left them. And you can still go out to Arizona and places like that in California and find pictures of the ant people. And they have what they call the star people and all that. But there's so many stories out there, and it's so much more likely that they're TE and not ET, terrestrial, entities and not extraterrestrial. And now the amount of cameras that catch things, and all these things are not drones. But what I've noticed is there's definitely a connection between. There's a few places on Earth that you can go there every day. Like there's a place in South Carolina that's over by where the gimbal. And if you want to look these up on YouTube, look up the Go Fast event or the gimbal. G-I-M.
Say that again. The what?
The gimbal. Gimble. That's the East Coast. Or Go Fast is the other one. And on the West Coast with Commander Fravor, it's F-R-A, like favor, but with R, F-R-A-V-O-R, Commander Fravor. But it's called the Tic Tac event. That's the main one that they have the best video on. The Go Fast event, they call it that because they're watching it, and it looks like the one we've all seen, the Mexican military, where they call them on infrared. And those things are traveling, there was like 6 things traveling in a line. And the go fast, they call it that because you're hearing the fighter pilots all talking to each other. And they were all up there doing their exercises, and they also patrol our coastline. And they were asked to take a look at these things. And the guy's like, well, this time they said, oh, look, check this thing out. Now, what is it? Well, it looked just like the ones in Mexico that they caught. And it was almost like the thing heard them. And I watched it for a second, and it kind of seemed to stop and observe it. And these things jam their radar. You know, that's like sending a direct TV symbol straight at somebody. They're sending radar back. And it's kind of like somebody getting on your cell phone frequency and blasting static, you know, and it's funny.
So why do you think they're jamming our radar? Do you have any theories on
I think
what did they benefit by jamming our radar?
Primitive, and there's no way to target them, but if you and you're the perfect ones to talk to about Sumerian tablets, and I wanted to ask you about it. It has to do with this because the Tablet of Destiny it predicted wars and could tell you how to win and things like that. Well, one of the things is said to be destroyed, to destroy one, and the one that can't, the other part that can't be destroyed, to hide it on Earth. So and I know from researchers, and I mean the biggest name, I won't say the biggest name, I'm not going to tell who it is, but you know it, and they're in their place, and where they're researching, looking for something else, and one guy's at the mouth of the cave where his antenna is, and I'm watching and talking to him, and he said, we're getting ready to go do this thing, and you see his, well, I guess tropical Sherpas, Southeast Asia somewhere, and they run out of the cave, and they take off and never come back. And those people look for jobs like that. They want to work with an archaeologist, and it's an honor anyway. But if you can do that, you're living a lot better than anybody else down there. But they took off, and I'm the same way you guys are. I wouldn't have been scared. I would have been like, there's no way I'm leaving without finding why they ran. But looking around the corner, now if this is a person who there's no doubt in my mind that I believe it's 100% true. There's not very many people on the planet that I can say I would believe absolutely, totally 100% that that's a true story. He looked around the corner and he saw some things, a couple things floating off the ground, a couple spheres. And I've shown you the Vandenberg missile test where our Atlas V rocket was shot off, and the only thing during the Cold War that kept us from World War III was mutually assured destruction. Now, if we have 38 nations that we've allowed to come on Vandenberg's base and film the Atlas V, the first Atlas V multi-target, which means the fastest missile that's ever been built, and it's got an anti-missile defense system. You can't shoot it down. It defends itself with chaff and radar jamming and things like that. And also it shoots into 3 stages, but when something detected it leave the atmosphere, and look on YouTube, Vandenberg missile test UFO, and scroll down to the one that's 2 minutes long, and you'll see the engineer, because it's on CNN that morning. It was like they popped the background up behind him, like they were in the studio, and the guy, it was the engineer that built the thing, and the generals and the majors took him back there and said, what kind of game are you playing? And But first they're like, he's like, pretty good stuff, huh? The guy who made it. And they're like, yeah, but what kind of game you played? And he said, I have no idea what you're talking about. Well, the thing's going 18,000 something miles an hour until it hits escape velocity. And once it does, the stages, the first, the booster rockets fall off. And now you have one single long missile. That's 2 stages. And then that falls off. And when it does, the end is shaped like a cone. And now it literally takes off so fast. It's 200 miles above the planet. Well, once something on Earth, and I think it was ancient, like the Mahabharata War, or one of the Sumerian Wars, because it just weapons that were described, it sounds like it. But this video was absolutely real. Like Ken Johnson couldn't believe that I had a video of it, and I saw it happen because he was 6 miles off the coast where there's 100 other nations. But if the only thing keeping you from thermonuclear war is mutually assured destruction, the very last thing you want is for the fastest missile you've bragged about, whenever it releases, for something to catch up with it at about 800,000 miles an hour if it left the ground once the thing broke the atmosphere. And I think that's what it is. I think once it leaves space, once it goes into space to be able to make it to the other continent, it's detected maybe by some ancient satellite, or maybe that's what Black Knight is if it's really there. But it came into the screen, hit it with a beam of light, just like he says in the video. It flew a circle around it and left as fast as it came in. And it opened the thing like a can opener, cut it in half. All 7 warheads fell out. And it just popped in, it flew a circle around it and gone. Just in a blink. And when you put
send us that link? Can you get that link for us maybe during the break, and we'll put it up on your page? I appreciate that, yes.
Yeah. I always tell people when they ask, I said, I'll show you the smoking gun if there is one, because I've already seen the real events and the pilots and the places, and I'm just trying to figure out what the connection between the two is, because it seems where this huge structure and the only thing comparable in size to it that I found on Earth is the Great Wall of China. And it, see, it's already in my thing, Vandenberg, Mr. Test. But now there's so many, because they try to put so much disinformation out there. They put every Vandenberg test. And the reason why they use that base is because it's kind of like the highest point there. And when they fire, even if there's something goes wrong, it's a high point right on the beach on a base. And so it would just crash into the water. Let me see. And
about a couple that came to Hawaii, we had all of our phones went off and said, incoming, you got 15 minutes to live.
Yeah.
Basically.
How about that?
Was that part of this technology you're talking about?
I don't think so. I think some of them could be like maybe trying to take shots at them, which I wouldn't do that, because and that was a pretty good while back, and it's crazy because this was definitely caught by. Ken said he was in a boat, and there were probably 100 countries that were just off the border right behind him in international waters to watch it go overhead. And basically the whole world.
You're talking about Ken Johnston. You're talking about Ken Johnston.
Yes, Ken Johnston.
What year was this? Approximately.
I can't remember. It's on there. It's been a while. It was. You can tell just by looking at the videos. It looked like it was like maybe like 92 or something. I can't remember the first Atlas the Atlas 5 upgrade, the multi-target one. But, it was. There have been some things I've heard in Anunnaki stories and Mahabharata where like they're firing a bow and arrow and got 6 arrows because it can hit multiple targets, and like the Brahma weapon and things like that. And
Right.
you start finding where these things are, and the mythology describes it exactly. And hey, what's up? Want to say what's up to Heather Dykstra. Got a lot of people listening, and Dr. Mars. I'm getting the link for you. I'll give you the link. I don't know what to do with it on the screen. You can probably, or should I send it to Tom?
People listening can go to revolution.radio or on Studio B.
Is that on Revolution Radio? Is that on freedomslips.com?
Yeah, freedomslip.com or revolution.radio, and try revolution.radio. Not sure freedomslips.com is still up.
The video to Thomas, or do you? You can, and he talks straight, and it's only a 2-minute video, and you can kind of cut halfway through the video in just a second, and you'll see why it is like these smoking guns. It's just, I mean,
okay,
it's
set
just
up on aquarianradio.com. We'll put that on aquarianradio.com so listeners, this will be in the archive, so people can go to aquarianradio.com to the Jeffrey Boyd Jr. page, and they'll see this video, which we'll put up later or over the break. Sasha, you want a question?
No, it's a few things about, Jeffrey asked about some of the, what the Sumerian texts say. And they say that basically when Marduk, known in Egypt as Ra, was closing in with his armies, and his son Nabu had suborned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah and Zoar in Canaan, and they were converging on the spaceport on the Sinai Peninsula. Enlil, or Yahweh as he was called, ordered his sons to nuke both the Sinai and the south end of the Salt Sea, which became the Dead Sea, and it wiped out Sodom and Gomorrah and so forth. But the nuclear fallout from these bombs blew over Sumer, and it actually wiped out all of Sumer except for Babylon, where Marduk, or Satan as he's called, was underground, and Enki's place was far, and Basra was far enough north that they didn't get hit. In the meantime, someone retaliated against Inanna's place in the Indus Valley, and that's what you get in the Mahabharata, and that was probably Marduk blasting Inanna, because they were eternal rivals. And so that part of the Sumerian text do indeed corroborate the kind of thing that you're talking about. As far as the people, the ant people, what we have is stories of the people from Apis, which was the first planet that the Dracos hit, basically became the Greys, and some of them went underground. And what Clifford Mahudi, a Zuni elder, told me is that, and others have told me the same story, that basically in Noah's flood 13,000 years ago, the ant people asked the Hopi and the Zuni, who are their guards, to come underground and be safe with them, and they brought them to the area by Sedona, and they made a fenced-off area with great big walls, about 100 square miles, and their job for while it was still repeating floods, was to gather survivors for a few centuries, and then all of them were transported to the Four Corners area. That's the Hopi and Zuni story. So that, again, talks about the ant people saving the American Indians, but the timing, of course, in this story is the Great Flood.
Yeah, I've just thought about like an advanced race. Like we're building just like they talk about the reason for building an artificial intelligence. And that's why I was thinking the tablets of destiny, because one of them can be destroyed, one couldn't. Like, what would be something that you couldn't destroy? And maybe it's something etherical or something alive, or something along those lines.
It's the architecture. What about the actual architecture and the secrets of all the mathematics of the whole universe are encoded in the pyramid structures that they built all over? It's all there, all the formulas for everything in the universe, from the smallest to the largest. Or that's one hypothesis, anyhow.
Yeah. I'm also getting the Commander Fravor Tic Tac event, the view from the F-18, because this guy, you can look him up on the Joe Rogan. It was a good interview. You can tell he's a fighter pilot. He doesn't care that he's like, I saw it. I didn't ever want to come on a show or anything. And it happened in 2004, the first time for me. I think he had been on for about a month that you hear him say, Fast Eagle, we're going to real world tasking, which means we're going from training the people who just went from Cessnas to F-18 or just learning to ride in the back, because the guy in the back is kind of the cameraman, the radar guy, and you can tell he's just like, the thing was just there. It looked like a tic-tac in the sky, and the wind was at that altitude is actually blowing faster than this thing was going. Sometimes it stop. There's no loud.
Jeffrey, listen. If that was if the tic-tac pattern was a mathematical pattern, if the pattern itself was trying to communicate something, there's something. And what it looks like, it seems to be the same matrix that you get in the two-slit experiment with the options of altering time-space.
Yeah, and whenever you're not observing, it turns back into a wave, and you get like 5 slits on the wall instead of 2 or 3. Okay, I found it. I was trying to look, because there's like a million videos. I was trying to find the one just from the F-18 and just the pure stuff, so you don't have to dig through anything to see it. But it's in forward-looking infrared, and they have it in the thermal spectrum. So they're looking at the heat, and where you can see on the screen where it says white is hot, and so it just, the best way to describe it is a clear tube, like a Tylenol capsule or a Benadryl or something, and then there's a rectangular kind of cube rotating inside of it, and sometimes it would just drop down to the surface. Then they said, oh, it just jumped and dropped. And they said there's something in the water. It looks like a downed aircraft, so it kind of had the cross shape. But when you're in an airplane and you're flying over the ocean and there's something just under the surface, it's just like a wave. You know how it is a circle, and then once it gets more shallow, that rotation is pushed up on, and that's what makes a wave. That wave is rolling across the top of the water in the ocean, getting stronger and stronger. And then whenever it gets into shallow water on the continental shelf, if it's 20 feet tall, once it hits 17-foot water, you start seeing it. And there's even bridges on Point Doom. That's why I'm starting to think these things are connected. And the best way to describe it is one of those walkways at a hospital that goes out of the street to the other, except for by estimating the measurements of it, it would make it more like a 4 or 8 lane highway, but inside it has no support columns. It's exactly 90 degrees. It's exactly perfect. It looks like it looks like just like a walkway, but it looks wider than long, and it connects to the building next to it. And I'm like, to me, that my best hypothesis on it, since there are no arches, there are no natural shapes to it. The best guess is that it is not natural, but it's indoor, and so they can go from one structure to the other, because over time the melting ice cap that caused Malibu Canyon separated the two things. And anybody who's ever been to the Grand Canyon, those things can get pretty deep. And so if you're trying to go from a building on one side to the one on the other, then you start realizing the size of it, and then you realize this is Mugu Point, like North Beach, Malibu, where like the biggest waves in that area are, and it has no types of support, and it hasn't eroded over 12,000 years, and not over 20,000 years, and not over what I think is more like Ice Age, because it had to be above ground when it was built. Because if it was not, you can't have water erosion runoff for something that's underwater. And if 400 feet deep, 400 feet less or lower sea level was 12,000 years ago, how long ago was this? Because the depths I keep finding this other time, I'm like, forget Atlantis. Atlantis literally means the daughter of Atlas. It would be like one city. And I am thinking about the world today, and we have hundreds of nations, and some of them have hundreds of languages, and some nations, and you start thinking about it like that, and I start looking out at the sky, and you have to think, if you could live underground, this structure is dealing with the waves, the erosion, everything, and it's still perfect. It hasn't collapsed, even no matter.
It could have been on the surface of Lemuria, which was here a long time ago, and it was first occupied by Dracos, who were driven off by attacks by the Galactic Federation. But there was indeed, by the CIA records anyway, a continent of which Hawaii was a peak, and the west coast of California was peaks, and so was Japan and the Philippines and so forth. But there was a big continent called Lemuria. And the other thing I was wondering, but because you can penetrate that deep with your machines and stuff, Jeffrey, can you tell what those columns and what that stuff is made out of, and if you keep digging deeper, is there any way using the LiDAR that you can, and whatever feedback you get back, to tell what this stuff is made of? Is it basalt or what is it?
That's what I'm trying to work on right now, but it's something that obviously is strong enough to not accumulate like coral and things like that, or there's upkeep. Somebody's still taking care of it, and with technology to keep it clear. It has no like rubble on the floor. There's not a random rock. sitting there, or there's nothing random about it. On Google it is, but if you look at the real image, but that's the only thing I've ever had to protect is how I got that image, because if you try to, I even tried to get one in Silver City when we were in New Mexico, and you cannot look underground in New Mexico. And that's what I was saying about all these universities. Without question, how do you get so many worldwide that will agree to a set story? Because that's the difference in our history and theirs, is, to take a test. Now I realize I was having to go learn something wrong in order for it to be the right answer on the test. And like Christopher
Yes,
Columbus,
that's how they work.
the only thing Christopher Columbus did in 1492 is take chlamydia and syphilis back to Europe and slaves. But I let the data tell me what it is, and it was still above ground, because Malibu Canyon, which is like 4 deep canyon, and then there's one that runs around the building, and imagine 2 round buildings like the Coliseum, but they're shaped like an oval. But the one on the right, the one more south, like where Baja California is, more toward the south, like San Diego, because it's that big, it stretches. I mean, it's that big, but you can see 6 miles out, but you see the pillars, but the one with the door you can see inside of, and the other one you can't see what the bigger structure is, and Google's taken that totally off of the map, and they've made all the columns look like they're laying like at a 45 angle, kind of like slope. But how long would it take for ice melting water runoff to dig canyons around something? And because they didn't build the bridge before they knew it was going to be needed, but we're talking about something huge. This thing's its own city, state. It's massive. And now I look back and I think it is, because the distance you can, especially the new images, is really getting better. But there's different kinds. There's muon radiography, where we're using cosmic rays to go through anything. But when they hit the atmosphere, they're called muon particles. And you lay down a tile floor at the lowest point, like in the Bent Pyramid, they did it. And they just did the Great Pyramid. But imagine laying a white tile floor, but the tile floor, you use white X-ray tiles. So all night long, cosmic rays rain down in different directions, and it'll tell you the density of every cubic millimeter in the thing. It's that super high resolution. It's a company in Japan, and then they take the tiles back, they put them in the same position on the floor as it was, and there's something called high-speed microscope that reads it and calculates it's slowed down the cosmic rays go straight to the whole earth, through your body all the time, but it will change their speed. Or if they make a long mark, it means they came in more horizontal and at a lower, more acute angle. And then there's things like bluefin sonar, things like that. I've found whose image.
That's off. Back 5 minutes. Commercial break. Cosmos. I'm your host, Johan Calleman, and I'm here with Dr. Sasha Alex Lessin on Revolution Radio, Studio B at revolution.radio. Our producer is Thomas Becker, and our guest is Jeffrey Boyd Jr. Before we get back to the show, I'd like to remind everybody to please go over to the tab at the top of revolution.radio and make your donation, because we really need your donations to keep the lights on, to stay on the air, and to bring you shows like this one. So, Dr. Lessin, you're back. What would you like to say about what we're doing so far today?
Okay, well, what we're doing is really exciting, sort of cutting edge. What happens is people in academia who have security clearances and they have to toe the line in order to keep their jobs can't tell the truth the way that Jeffrey's telling you the truth about what's there. And so we're free of academia here. We're actually looking at data.
Yeah, people said, like, you know, I've been in college. It's not like I didn't go to college. I've been on both sides of it. But you see people who, it's like, are they really organized, or is the system just set up to where it's effective all over? Because just like out-of-place artifact, I always say, even if you find a Coke can in a deep cavern, that tells something about it, yes, even if it was from yesterday. And so there's no out-of-place artifacts, only out-of-place history and out-of-place researchers or authors or whatever. But you got people writing books about Egypt and then selling them as textbooks to 5 classes for 5 years. And they go over there, and it's like the first rule of science. Never test for a certain result, because you'll get that result and you'll ignore everything else, or you'll test until you get that answer and ignore all other data. And people get their story, and this is all of the Egyptology stuff, which that's like saying Louisianaology. It's ridiculous. And all these places, now that we look underground, I found that the pyramids are just the top of a structure. That's why they've said something older was there before, or they built a foundation under that. And before, I'd do a scan of it and say, no, there's something under there, and then bam, it's no more access. But somebody writing a book, they go over there and they say, Imhotep was the pyramid builder, and here's the evidence, and the bent pyramid was a mistake, even though the name of the pyramid literally means 2 tongues. And so they go over there and they only stay on the tourist route. And that's why I like Ildy's pictures, and I tell people to go on her tours, because she goes where she feels, like Ur and places like that. But now that we've looked at Saqqara and places like that, all these tourists have been going on there for years, all the way back to Herodotus and the original people who believe. That was a joke made the other day on somebody's show, and it was a big show, and I laughed because they said, next thing you're going to tell me is the Irish built the pyramids. And I said, and I had to laugh, and I'm like, do you know where Scotland got its name from? Yeah. The princess fled, the Anunnaki part of it, from the India area, or wherever she was before, because the dark ones were warring, and went to Egypt. We don't even know what they called themselves or what the place was called. I doubt it was Egypt. But she wanted to marry who she wanted to marry, and those people had found out where they had been, where they had established a civilization. And so they left there and went north, and Princess Claudia is where Scotland got its name. And they came directly from where Egypt is now. And you see pictures of pyramids, and now they try to tell us they're hoaxes, but they're on Mars. But the word Cairo literally means city of Mars. And there's just all these connections, and you're just like, I look at the scans underground, and then I look like my presentation at the conference. As above, so below. I'll look up and I'm like, if we can live underground, we might be the first ones or the second ones to even think in the way of building up, because that's what we've always known since we were born. How many places, if you look at the Getty, the Getty Museum, like on Catalina Island and places like that, earlier scans that I got to showed a structure under the museum, and there's just certain places where it makes no sense. Like, why wouldn't you let me look under the desert in New Mexico? Well, you know what's out there. There's Los Alamos, and there's the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and there's everything else. But I even tried looking under Silver City and under the Gila area out there by Karen and Brett, and where I was climbing around, and a follow-away zone I went to where like half a mountain where a crack or something finally fell away. Well, that exposes all these layers, and so I found all this cool stuff that was pushed up out of the earth by pressure, and you find all these weird different gemstones with different feet, and it's almost like a timeline that's exposed itself, and then the rocks, the bottom, have eventually rolled down the little ravine that's at the bottom that goes down right there by the end of their road. And I'm thinking, why can't there's almost nothing in Baja California or anywhere south. There's really Mexico south of Silver City and south of their place, and you think, why wouldn't they let me look underground? But the thing that blows my mind is I forgot the guy who in Washington who actually saw the 5 things or whatever the media said, flying saucers, and they started coming up with that. But I think it's just as amazing with like tenure and writing books and money, which I guess that is about different people have values for things, and it's amazing that they will do everything they can to ignore evidence. And even when I found something and somebody called into a show I was on, and I instantly showed them what was inside Point Doom, and it wasn't very long later that the Caracas Museum closed with the elongated skulls, and then they said you can't, it's illegal to dig even an inch deep at Machu Picchu, because I couldn't imagine. If the pyramids are all
let me tell you about I've been studying Teotihuacan, where we have this, they keep using the LiDAR, going deeper and deeper. It's about 60 miles north of Mexico City, in a sort of barren area. And so they keep going down deeper and deeper. And there's usually the older temples are all broken down for the next level of temples and the next level of temples. But they finally get down to the bottom. And they get down pretty low, and they find there's more than that. There's a shrine of somebody who's mentioned in the Sumerian tablets, and it's the feathered serpent. It's Quetzalcoatl, and they don't destroy his temple, which is now, we're now down, quite deep, but the archaeologists say there's a lot more way down there, and there's a way bigger city than the one on the top, and so what the Sumerian tablets tell us distinctly is that Thoth, he was known as Ningishita in the old world, but basically Thoth came over here and he ran the gold mining on top of Tiwanaku, and then he came down and found gold in the area of Teotihuacan, and started. And so the original inhabitants of Teotihuacan, that we can tell by the sculpture and the hieroglyphics. These are bearded Sumerian people, black West African people, and the so-called Indians, the South American Indians, who are really just the descendants of Cain, who Thoth had brought over earlier to help build Tiwanaku and to also settle the city of Chavin in western Peru. So that we know, this is even before the Maya came. These are the people that preceded the Toltecs, and the Toltecs came into Teotihuacan, and after a while they left and they moved down to the Yucatan Peninsula. But anyway, so that's all the stuff that you're saying is confirmed by the findings that I've been looking at for the Mayan area and for Mexico.
Yeah, and I mean, that's true, and it's everywhere. But the thing is, I tell people, and it should raise a lot more flags. The pictures that I post, not the ones that I keep to myself, there's one reason why I show them. I say, here's this image. And people are like, he's the first one to ever get the image of it. And I'm like, no. There is an entire system of thousands of universities with hundreds of thousands of professors and scientists and researchers. And then there's research labs that are government funded and everyone else. And I'm using the NASA Commons Go system, and I'm using NOAA's weather's technology, and I look at places through their stuff and find the same things, and I say everyone in the system has seen this, and no one has put it on the news. It's just all the TV. It's just cartoons.
It's the lie of evolution. When I was in academia, you had to say that all these things, the great megalithic structures, were by people that were chipping stones together and evolved, and it was intrinsic to humans that were doing it, and they didn't have any help from higher technologically advanced civilizations, and this is so patently false. And the accounts of everybody everywhere is that people with superior technology and perhaps telepathic abilities assisted, and they used things like sonar and psi control to move things, and they had advanced metallurgical techniques of pouring metal spikes down drilled holes in, and they could also make liquid concrete, chemically bonded concrete. We can just do it now too, and they poured it in great big molds. The evidence is overwhelming. But academics are. If you start saying this, no, these people, they were chipping a basalt with these other stones that were slightly harder, and they had thousands of years to do it. Just such nonsensical ways people twist themselves, because if you don't get promoted.
I agree. My first article, my article that was in Advanced Archaeology Review, was called Ancient Megalithic Metallurgy. And if you look, there's no history on it, and they say, the history just totally doesn't make sense. It's like, when it describes it was discovered in South America and then made its way to North America, but it's almost like Belize and Mexico are next to each other, but so people have a reference. It's like in 2,000 years ago, or 6,000 years ago in Louisiana, metallurgy was invented and used, and then, 10,000 years ago, and then only 200 years ago, metallurgy found its way to Texas, and there's, it's like an invisible line right there, and then metallurgy.
Yeah.
But those things, and the answers are so simple. Like, you see the thing that says the Sun Gate down there in Bolivia, Teotihuacan, and
yeah,
and it's simple. Just look around you. This house in 1,000 years will be nothing. The gypsum, the sheetrock, the wood will be biodegraded. The dressers, the electronics, all will be gone. But when you look at that wall that has a doorway in it, the very first thing I assumed before I even knew it was called the Sun Gate was it was the one remaining wall or part of the front wall. And because like you find an old house or the last thing left on is the chimney, all of us have found them out in the woods or something, or a house that they're knocking down, and you can go push the bricks over. So the rest of the house could have been made out of brick. But that's also why they did the jigsaw pattern. And from there to the pyramids, the architecture is advanced to the point where they can build something that is advanced. And like building a cathedral, a massive cathedral. And that's like saying that's right when they discovered the wheel and the chiseled out of one piece of stone, and the all of the stained glass with pieces of stuff they found on the bottom of the ocean floor colored. The stories are so opposite Occam's razor. They have to go out of the way, and people don't question it. And it's just amazing. You look above our heads, and there's rock recently, like this, called like 67B or something, and it like skipped off our atmosphere. It came so close. And we're talking about like planet killer size. It literally didn't even make a blip on the news. And I've heard on the news, there's going to be a meteor pass between the Earth and the Moon, which is relatively, or that's very close in astronomical numbers, but something's skipping off the atmosphere because it's coming at a shallow angle. That's the same way the shuttle comes in, and even the Apollo thing. But I think it's just amazing. And what's more amazing, the actual structures and the ridiculous stories that they stick to, are the fact that even with the evidence you find and prove something, like Point Doom and a huge structure next door, and then the bridge over the canyon, and it's in hundreds of columns, or 100 columns lined up equidistant apart. They're each the same size. And then the bridge, and then you have another one built the same way. They're both round buildings, and rounded buildings, and just like the pyramids, like they're this advanced.
It's what you say about
chisel from 400 miles away and drag them. Mm-hmm. That makes no sense.
It's the same, Jeffrey, as above, like Iapetus, which is a moon of Jupiter. There's the same wall that goes all the way around it, like the wall that goes all around Earth, when it was above the waters even. But the Iapetus has this complete wall, gigantic.
It's like we were 6,000 years, and then Klaus Schmidt took over a T-rock sticking out of the ground and go back to Tepe. And now we find out Norsen, Mark Shermer's Skeptic magazine, his point was that there were no living quarters there. And Norsen Tepe, we found out they dug subterranean, and the dirt that they used to go below, they built stories above it, and then they covered it. Well, you see those same buildings structures in Ireland and here in Louisiana and everywhere. And in the United States, there's something called the honeycomb mound. And over, man-made reservoirs have been chosen to be put there so they could flood it and cover it. And it's just, I mean, even to Oak Island, they know that they found out for sure. They pulled a post up out at the bottom of it on the season finale, and they took it to a researcher, and the researcher said, well, these are 3 Roman crossbow bolts inside. So,
wow.
Instead of the 350-year-old pirate story, they couldn't accept that. They had to have the 400-year-old pirate story from something as a kid. You know, the truth is not desired. They came with the answer. Now they're looking for evidence to prove it. And recently they broke down and found the Roman-style plumbing system in the swamp area. And then you're like, okay, but this has been the story. If you use the data and let it tell you what history is, Rome did at the time at 2000 BC didn't have the Navy Carthage did. Well, there was a Carthaginian sword found in the water and in Mahudi Bay, and a Mahudi is a Portuguese troop carrier, so that's how they knew they were there. But that's the entranceway to get into the Great Lakes and to get into Isla Royale where all the copper is. I believe the Roman Empire rose to power on the money it made off of taxing people for mining the copper, and the copper they got from it. They made all their brass and everything. Because their story on there was so ridiculous, and people will take it. They said, oh, it has to be fake because brass wasn't patented in California until 18.
Oh my gosh.
And I said, that is the silliest thing I've ever heard. You're telling me that the Romans had brass, but it had to all be fake swords, even overseas, because it wasn't patented in California until 1867. And then you find out Marty and Rick Lagina were in on it on the History Channel. And now you have to, I always just applied the thought that once you find out it's a filed source of data, you no longer can use it as a reference. And it's just so silly. And people don't want to believe that the pyramids made concrete, but I'm sorry, you can look at the Sphinx right next to the pyramid. One of them, the pink, you see the Sphinx, 100,000 years worth of weathering, carved in place, limestone. It's light brown, sand colored, like almost white. And then the pyramid is right next to it, and it's brown. And it's a totally different color, and there's no weather erosion. And inside there's water markings, water lines, and where the top of that water line is, there's like where stuff flows on top of the water. It's in the Grand Gallery, where bubbles are on top of the water when you have a mixture or whatever. And like, it was a big machine of some type, but it's sodium carbonate. Mm-hmm. And those are the two things you need for hydroelectrolysis, and that was the first show. Last time I did the show, Sacred Matrix, the second show I ever did was pyramid hydroelectrolysis, the Nonga Gang, and pyramid frequencies. And these things are. Look at all those old megalithic cities, all shaped like a circuit board, just like from Angkor Wat to Teotihuacan, and all of them are shaped like that. But it's the same thing in Bosnia. Beams come out and they seem to show up in pictures on rainy days, but they go up there and they find a drone, and they're trying to find out from Mexico to Russia why the beams come out of the top of the pyramid and what's making the energy, and they're testing the pyramid. But I try to give everybody the example. The data tells me the way I figured out is copper top battery, take it upside down, put it in the sand, touching the metal contact, quartz, something containing quartz. And I think they were mixing quartz into their concrete type stuff. But if you have positive side down, that they put a rover, this is where the question came from, they put a drone above it, and the strongest point of the beam should be right at the tip of the pyramid, or close, if not inside, but at the top, at the apex, where it's supposed to be. But it's not. You go up 3 times, and it's a 13-foot radius, so it's 26 feet wide total, and it goes straight up, and when you get 300 feet up or so, it gets like 300 times stronger, and that varies depending on the day. But I think you move water through there faster and clear out some of those tunnels where you saw the video with Dr. Valerie Uberov and Michael Tellinger and Klaus Dona. But you clear those waterways out and let water start flowing through there again. And I even found out, I was talking to Dr. Sam and through Bruce Cunningham and some people, getting information. I said, get him to look and see if any of those stones, like the one that had the outline of a leaf on the side of it, which means it's probably concrete. And you don't see where a leaf sticks to a natural rock and make a mark. And I said, well, test for quartz. And that would make piezoelectricity. Well, if you charge it negative side up, it would pull the positively charged ionosphere down. And so the ionosphere is coming down, but since the machine's not totally together anymore, if you were to clear those pathways, I think it would get closer to the top. And so it touched it. And then you start looking at pyramids everywhere, and you find cities were built around them, and they all have that quartz in common. And one thing about Teotihuacan, Mexico City, is, and like other sites, you found mercury there, which is a conductor, and a lot of people have it in old thermostat, and they have mercury in there from China to Mexico, and mica, which is also something for an electric technology. I call it piezoelectric macrochip technology. You make a microchip big enough, like huge, eventually the static of the air or the ionosphere itself with power. Now, what those things do, I don't know, but that's why I think that's independent.
One thing that other people have said, in addition to the electric stuff, they're saying that there was the machine under there was some kind of a pump that would pump water that was flowing in from the Nile, and that would start sort of in a coordination with the change, the piezoelectric change that happens a few hours before dawn every day. It would start this wave, and it would be pumped, and they would bring hydrochloric acid and potassium, hydrated potassium together, make a hydrogen explosion, and then a whole series of capacitators. But somehow or other, and he came to the same conclusion you did. It didn't go out the very apex; it went out at an angle, and so what I thought of is that's what causes a sort of a toroid and a magnification effect.
Yeah, and those things they call vents, they're not blocked off with. Once they ran the robot up there and found copper handles, just like when I was in like 4th grade, I did a science project where I took 2 nails and put them into a cork with wrap positive and negative around the end of each nail, put it in the clear bucket, poured water in there, filled the test tubes up with water, put one over the positive, one over the negative, and then poured baking soda in there. That's sodium bicarbonate, which sodium carbonate is 10% of what the pyramid's made of, 30%, or 30% water, 60% sand. And that's what you need for hydroelectrolysis. And that's, you got electricity, but you need something metal for the bubbles to form on, and then a chamber for it to fill up. The nail would get each nail would get a bunch of little bubbles on it, and then the tube would start filling up and the water being pushed out. And the hydrogen would fill up twice as fast as the oxygen. And then I would take it off in a fireplace match and light the hydrogen below a flame like 10 feet tall. I doubt they'd let
Wow.
you.
Yes.
But see, they were doing that, and if that, it exactly explains their an advanced technology, because if they were doing that, their byproduct on the closed side would have been pure, clean burning H2 hydrogen fuel. And on the other side, they would have had a byproduct of totally pure oxygen from broken down water. And the electricity splits it. So they're getting fuel from it, charging batteries from it, anything. And Tesla proved that you could send it remotely. And that's why I think those cities from Angkor Wat to just name any of the places, they're all built like a microchip. And what blows my mind is the mica found in Mexico City and other places is from Brazil. And so it's Brazilian mica. And then you find cobras, like statues and carvings in Mexico that I've seen, and places like Ecuador, and statues of Egyptians like praying. There's one in the Oaxaca Museum, and it was a global civilization back then, because there's never been a cobra ever. Cobras do not exist in North and South America, but there were carvings of them that old that have been there forever. And one thing that blew my mind is that the Native Americans, since they had so many nations over here, and just like the Aborigines, the originals, they have their own clans. They call them mods, but they're different clans, they're different nations, and they speak different languages, and that's how it was back then. But this is easy to look up, but no one teaches this stuff, because if they can't explain it with something that fits into their little American history story, because the history changes also on what country you're in and what their religion is. That's why you have to take it to an independent, because before Klaus Schmidt, you couldn't get anybody in South America to date anything over 6,000 years. And then he finds Göbekli Tepe, and now it's 12,000 years. And it's like Oak Island. The other story was the ceremonial sword from Carthage that dated to 2200 BC or something. They said it was fake because of the brass thing, but the sillier story, or just as silly, is that a kid must have been playing with it on the front of a boat and dropped it in the water. But my question is whether it be 1980, 2020, or the year 2000, or the year 2000 BC. would you let your kid take a ceremonial sword that was a treaty between the two people, an agreement that we're going to use your Navy to get over there to tax them, to bring the money back to them, and we're both getting rich, and eventually the Carthage Navy ended up being the Roman Navy. But the stories are just so convoluted and just so messed up. Chief Joseph, when the Dutch came over, because the Spanish had been over and they spoke a different language, but when the Dutch came over, Chief Joseph goes and gets their most ancient artifact, because Columbus, they had been tricked before. Columbus and people said they've got a map of the eclipse, and they're like, we can't make it back across the ocean. Give us some food. Well, they don't make any extra. They were sustainable, and that's it. And he said, if you don't give it to me, my God that's stronger than your God's going to swallow your God's moon, and he's going to warn you first by doing something, putting his mouth around it and make it red or something. Well, they knew that the eclipse was coming up, so the ship got filled up. So when the Dutch came over, they made a treaty with Chief Joseph. And Chief Joseph went and got what he said was his oldest relic or artifact, family heirloom, that had been passed down from chief to chief in the nation. And the thing that he gave to the Dutch was a Sumerian tablet. And we're talking about 1500s, early 1600s, and his gift to him was a Sumerian tablet. And it's like, this isn't supposed to be here. This is an out-of-place artifact. No, it's not. And he got that somehow, and it wasn't by somebody dropped it off the stairs in Sumer or in Egypt or wherever, and in Mesopotamia, and it landed in the North America. There's just nothing to explain it other than the Sumerians were on both sides of the ocean, and our history goes back further than that, because the evidence, when you put it all together, only makes sense. Things like the Sumerian tablet being here, and these weapons that are still on Earth and that are still hidden. And now researchers, and I'm telling you, this guy's respectable. You guys would know his name in a second. I'm not saying it on the air. We were in a private conversation on Skype, so I don't think he wanted me to tell him. But this is not somebody, ancient aliens, none of that stuff. But told me there were two spheres, metallic, floating off the ground, 2 or 3, and they ran out, and I had to go see. And you don't want to be destroyed and go up and start messing with them, because if they're floating by themselves after thousands of years, they probably have some way to defend themselves, or they're probably deadly or radioactive or something. But things like that are being found all over the place. And I take the data, I just look at the data first and look worldwide. And all I'm doing is looking at things where this looks odd, or even like when we were in New Mexico, when I saw that marker on the side of the road, that picture of me standing on the side of the road, looking at that, there's a layer of obsidian, 45-degree angle sticking out of the ground right over there by Brett took it for the old Western Opera House, was in the saloon and all that. And now I look at every hill and I think, we have no idea what that is. And before, I would have never even imagined it was anything more than just a little hill out in the field. And now, in the United States, you open a hill that has grass on top of it, and you dig into it, and you find out that it has this huge honeycomb shape to it, and that you could like live in and or store things in. And I don't know. The only thing they can do is put a reservoir over there and rebury it and tape it off, not allow people there, and it happens all the time. And then that's where you're going to make the new reservoir for the new city water, and we're going to cover up the honeycomb mound, because otherwise the story's going to have to be that it must have been dinosaur bees. I mean, what's going to be the next dumb answer that you give us in the backward science, and where the story is established, and then you go over there and you prove it with evidence, or even more evidence. Ildy sends me all these pictures, and there's these vaults. She was there when they found like that vault system, and underground, when you look at the scan, it's shaped like a snowflake kind of. It's like an asterisk, a star, but the ends of it they kind of get wider. And inside of them, they have these vaults, and they're black basalt mixed with some type of quartz, something shiny, and they have thin lines of like gold or something, but they are not covered in anything. But on one of them, some Egyptian tried to carve a cartouche or something inside of it, glyphs, and it looked like a third grader Egyptian. Like they couldn't even get into this thing, which further shows that they were doing metallurgy and melting rock. They still do it today in Africa, out in the jungle, and it's not hard. And the place is like the 3,000 room labyrinth in Saqqara. That one has, from what they can see on the scans they've done, it looks like there's decorations on the wall. That could have just been some person, huge, obscene mansion or barracks for an army or something like that. But I think that's where Herodotus got the story when he went back to Greece and wrote the story of the labyrinth, the Minotaur, and everything. But when I look at something, I see the complexity of it, and say that's too complex, and they can't bury kings or pharaohs and pyramids, because they're all buried in the Valley of the King, KV, King's Valley. And the advanced structure of this building, it's too advanced for someone to be dumb enough to pour a concrete block that weighs 50 tons and then drag it. Because a 50-ton stone made of that wants to fall apart under its own weight, but you can do it 2.78 million times, and you can carry it 400 miles, place one perfectly every 15 seconds, non-stop, perfectly for 20 years, and never make one mistake. You can be a quarter inch off dead center. It makes more sense to say, that's not the story. And a ramp, if there was a ramp, like in the movies, like 10,000 BC in the movies, they had great mammoths that were dragging stones up the ramp. The problem is the ramp is twice as big as the pyramid. You would have to it would take twice as much work to build the ramp as the pyramid. And so none of it makes sense. And, Steve Myers, I did an interview with him, and he has a great idea of a little lock system. You put, have a block there that you made, and then have whatever that floats underneath it, and then flood it with water. Build it on the boat, and then fill it with water, just like they do in Panama, and then move it from the Atlantic Pacific. And, but the Earth is now, I have no doubt into 100% that there was ice age architecture, but that doesn't even say it's human. That there's not enough data there. There's no pictures of people, and it's huge. And they would have had to have machinery that we've never even seen. And it was on ground. It wasn't on the ocean. So there was no, they could make it because it was under the water and so it's easy to put together. No, this thing is perfect and it's huge. And it's a palette, like something you'd see on a Thor movie or something. But the insurances and the dimensions, unless some type of shift or something is going in and out of it, or they just want it to be grand, where you look up and the doorway is 100 times taller than you. It's not a structure that would be for somebody our size. Pillars is absolutely enormous, like the size of a redwood, like as tall but thicker, and they hold up this huge amount of sand on top of it. But it looks like it's perfect. There's no debris on the floor, nothing from the silicone casing pressure that I can find, and it seems like it's untouched. There's nothing out front that would show that, but a naval station right next to an underground structure that was above ground during the Ice Age. So you can call it Sycamore Knoll, but that's not change the shape of it. It don't change the size of it. It doesn't change the scientific definition of beauty, symmetry. And this thing is built like an NFL stadium or something and has support beams that go off in the distance. It looks like you can see Malibu above the water and you can see it, and it's kind of like when you're looking at it, this thing is holding up California. And then I remember hearing a guy on one of the MUFON conferences, and he was talking about how LA and the Getty and all that are an underground system. But if you look out in space and look, even if you just look at the moon, you would say, number one, Earth probably going to get a meteor or whatever keeps hitting the moon. But if you do get hit and you want to live past that, you don't have to need to go to Mars. You need to start building underground. And something came up the other day that Sasha reminded me of. That was an earthquake that was 600 feet or 600 miles deep. I mean, earthquakes are supposed to be inside the crust. A little bit under that, possibly. But 600 to 800 feet deep, or miles deep, it's supposed to be the mantle, liquid. And so that's why I think the Earth has aquifers and other things, and I've looked straight through Antarctica and straight through a lot of other things and found they weren't what we believed or been told. And I found things that look like huge fans and sitting right on top of a volcano. I'm like, that'd be a really awesome geothermal power plant. You could power the whole world. And then you look at it and think about where it is, and I'm like, it's in the most remote location in the whole world. I mean, Antarctica, you're better off getting hurt there and having a chance to get to medical help than if you're at this place. You know, this is on an island that you can't see. And the only way I found it is I turned on the thermal lens, and in the ocean there was a red and turned all the way to black, which showed extreme heat. And there's nothing there but water. But when I zoomed in, there's a little island. You zoom in more, and there's a freaking machine there. We're talking about huge. And in the pictures, there's helicopter, like Chinook helicopter in the background. I guess it. And you don't, but you have no point to compare it to until you see. There's a couple different images of it that I found where people were standing next to it, and we're talking massive, like bigger than an aircraft carrier, and deep under the ice, deep under the ice, but it's like a crack revealed it, and you see these two guys looking down into the hole, and then there's a group of another 3 guys and snowmobiles, and it looks like they look like ants sitting next to a toy car or something, you know. It's just massive, and we don't know what it is. And there's the same thing in Antarctica.
So you have these pictures, videos, or pictures that you have? Can you send that to me?
The Grand Canyon of Antarctica, does it have a name?
The what?
Does that canyon have a name?
Oh, the canyon?
Yeah, the one we're looking down.
What is it, a hole?
I'll send you a picture of it, but no, it doesn't have a name, but I've seen it before on people use it, because disinformation is going to come out anytime good information comes out, and somebody somebody
on AquarianRadio.com, it looks like a giant piece of machine or something underneath the ice, and there's
looks like a zodiac in
people
there.
are standing, and they look like bigger than ants. Yeah.
I think
it looks like a zodiac.
Yeah, but I know exactly where it's at, even the name of the island, and there's even a little strip of island, and you got to imagine if the water was lower, that strip of island might have been one piece of land, but it looks like floating.
Could be a turbine.
Exactly, but
we have 1 minute left. We
like,
gotta wrap up.
But you know, you've got some people like, you know, that couple who is very entertaining, and they're on certain .coms, and they seem to be on every show, and they've been to Mars. They have it on their show, and it says Antarctica, and it shows that fan thing, and it's not even in Antarctica. It's thousands of miles from Antarctica, and I'm like, you don't even know what. Somebody's sitting there. You guys have found pictures and put it up there, because it's looking at.
Thank you.
Fascinating. Thank you for joining us.
Learned a lot.
And I'm
Very cool.